Hey everyone, welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook. I'm Adam Orth. Today I'm joined by Jeff Gardiner, founder and CEO of Something Wicked Games. Jeff's had an incredible career. He spent nearly 2 decades at Bethesda Game Studios, contributing to some of the most influential RPGs of the modern era, including Fallout 3, Fallout 4, Fallout 76, Oblivion, Skyrim, and a host of other expansions. His work helped shape the standards of open world storytelling, branching quest design, and large-scale player agency that continue to influence the genre today. In 2022, Jeff founded Something Wicked Games with a team of veteran developers from Bethesda, Obsidian, and other leading AAA studios. The company was created with the goal of delivering ambitious story-driven RPGs while building a healthier studio culture in a fully remote environment. Their debut title, Wordsong, is a preternatural open-world RPG set in a fictionalized medieval Portugal, blending history, myth, and the occult with player-driven storytelling. It represents both a bold creative vision and Jeff's next chapter as a leading, shaping figure in the future of role-playing games. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you so much.
We got it. I got through that. I finally got through it.
Very kind.
How are you? Is this your first time in Scotland?
My first time in Scotland.
Me too.
I love it.
Yeah, it's really great. For those listening, we're recording this episode live in person at the DICE conference in Edinburgh, Scotland. And Jeff, in my episodes, I really like to dive into how people found games, like that kind of first seed, whether it was interest in playing or creating, and then following that thread through today. So how did it all start for you?
It's funny. We just watched a talk with a gentleman I haven't met, and it's very similar to mine. So it all started I'm getting on in years. I'm a child. I was born of the 70s.
We're the graybeards.
Yes, the graybeards of the industry now. I in the 70s started with Dungeons and Dragons. I was the kid in Stranger Things who had 4 friends that were all nerds. My still to this day best friend Dave's older brother had a basic edition of Dungeons and Dragons that we borrowed from him and never returned. And we were like 7 or 8 years old, and that was it. Like, that was my 10 years through high school. I just fell in love with creating worlds and this sort of almost tribal storytelling, like campfire level storytelling that Dungeons and Dragons innovated and spearheaded. And I think many of us in the industry owe Gary Gygax and others a debt for that, because not only did it instill a love in gaming for me, but instilled a love of this sort of like viral story, this sort of on the role playing, which is you pick a role and then situations occur and then you try to reflect what your character would do in those situations, not necessarily what you would do. And it was fascinating. And so it started there, and then I got, my Atari, my Super NES, played Gold Box Zelda, and fell in love with video games. I was very into tech. We grew up, my same friend Dave I grew up in this tiny town called Hilton, New York. 3,000 people, 1 stoplight. I think they have a second stoplight now. And he had a PC. His father worked at this big company called Kodak, and he had one of the first PCs probably in that whole town. And we sat there and played this game, text-based game called Zork.
Zork.
Yes, which still to this day hasn't really been replicated, because you typed in prompts and tried to get through this weird mind maze, right? And I'll never forget, like, you're in a room with a bucket over a well, and if you typed kick the bucket, you would die, because that meant kick the bucket, right? The kick the bucket is a phrase meaning you croak. But those little things just stick with you. Obviously, that was like 40 years ago. And then I got my own PC and started playing video games, consoles, the Ataris and the Nintendos. And I loved it. I loved gaming. And then I just went to school. This story can take the whole 90 minutes, so I'm going to try to truncate it a little. I went to school to get a degree in creative writing arts. My father wanted me to be in business administration. I went to school under the guise of doing that. Never took a single business class. Took so many English classes. I figured that had to be my major. I couldn't decide between lit and creative writing. I chose creative writing. I got a track in fiction and drama. I took so many English courses in my senior year, they told me I can no longer take them because they would no longer count as credit. I then got in a
that
van.
situation too.
Yes, I got in a van, moved to California, and as all writers do, I ended up bartending. I bartended for a number of years on Sunset Strip in California until I went back to school, got a degree, master's degree in information technology, which led me to building websites. And then I met a guy at a party who I'm actually here with today. His name is Mark Morris. He was working at THQ, doing licensed IP SpongeBob games or something along those lines. And he had a friend of his named George Collins who had a studio. He was working at a place called Seven Studios, where I went and became a designer on the remake of Defender, which is one of my favorite games. I used to play it in the arcade. Got a chance to be a designer. And this is back in the days when we made games with 15 people. It was PlayStation 2. But what I loved about these days are back again in a lot of ways. We can talk about the state of the industry at some point. But
that's a big topic today.
Yeah.
I've got a lot for that.
What I loved about that is I got to do a little of everything. And in doing so, I now have an understanding and respect for all the disciplines and all the things that take to make a game. I think once you're siloed, you sort of can get blinders on and you can only see your problems and you can't see the problems as a whole. So anyways, I then, by hook and crook, I became lead designer of a licensed IP for Marvel and Activision called Fantastic Four. Ironically enough, they put a movie out this year. So I got story credit on that, lead designer credit on that, shipped it, and became an Activision greatest hit, which means they reprint them. They sold through so many copies they had to reprint it. So apparently it's still a poster of it still on the wall somewhere in Activision, maybe in their basement. And then I met Todd Howard at an E3 and I saw him pitch Oblivion and my D&D little bells went off and I started salivating like I was like, I'll do anything to work on this game. So I took a massive pay cut, went from lead designer to producer and moved over 2,000 miles to outside of Washington, D.C., where I spent 16 years at Bethesda.
All right, let's pause there for a second because that's an interesting place. But I wanted to bring up two things real quick. So you and I have the exact same origin story. Grew up in a tiny New England town.
Okay.
Got fascinated by games. Went to college. Blew out all the courses that you could take in your subject. Mine was music.
Okay.
Yours was English. Both moved out to California right after to go chase the dream and ended up in video games.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to bring up was this kind of like D&D. So D&D and your experience, like the kick the bucket story you told.
Sure.
This is a recurring theme with people I'm interviewing. A lot of people are having these really memorable moments with these early games that are prompt based, where they all have this one story, like your kick the bucket. Someone I interviewed yesterday had the exact same story, but different thing where the game creators would cross over from game into real life and back into game based on what you're putting in there. And I just think that's a really interesting note because and I want to get into this later also, but with the onset of AI today, and especially RPG games, the possibilities there are pretty uniquely interesting. And the idea of putting a prompt in and having it come back to the player in a unique way like that now, that, you know, if we were to do that now based on how it was done before, it would take a lot longer now because we would have to do that more and more and more because the amount of people playing the games, the amount of options. So I just think that's a really interesting point. And most people from our generation that I'm interviewing have that same exact story. And it's just really unique. Okay. So Bethesda is obviously a huge, massive part of your story. So you got Todd to hire you.
Yep.
You moved to Bethesda. Well, take us through that, because this really informs, who you are, what
Oh,
you've
of
done, and
course.
what you're doing
I,
now.
I owe everything to Todd and Bethesda Game Studios as a whole. When I started there, I was employee of Bethesda Game Studios. I was employee, I don't know, 50 something, 40 or 50 something. They had shipped Morrowind to a great success, but they were still a small independent studio in a lot of ways, especially compared to larger game makers even at that time. And this was what was this, 2005? It was October 2005, because in about a month I'll have 20 years in DC. It was an amazing experience. Like, you don't know what to expect, right? You fly out for one interview. There was no Zoom calls back then, right?
Yeah.
Like, I had a couple phone screening, flew out for an interview, spent all day with them. Went to this hotel across the street. Bethesda's it's not the middle of nowhere by any stretch of the word, but it's still like an industrial park sort of. There's a lot of office buildings around, is what I mean to say. There's not a lot of, so there's nothing really within walking distance. There's like a gas station, some other things, but you feel that energy, and it's sort of hard to describe when you just feel something click. And I felt the energy there. They had acquired the Fallout license at this point that was public, so I geeked out over that. I geeked out over Morrowind. And then like I said, I saw the E3 pitch for Oblivion, and there was things in that, like there's this analogy that I like to give. Like, I grew up in Led Zeppelin was sort of a little too old for me. So I got into Zeppelin when I was like in my early teens, but at this point they had broken up and disbanded. Yep. Right. So they were like maybe not even Nirvana. Nirvana's like way too old for that. So I don't even know an analogy to that today. That's how out of touch I am musically. So anyway, but now when you listen to Led Zeppelin, they don't sound that unique to a newer to like my kids, because not only they have, it's not anything to do with their age. It's the fact that they have done it. Everything that they have done has been replicated. They were innovators, right? So, but now you don't see that. It's hard to, if you're experiencing it in 2025, you don't see that because you weren't around. So a lot of what Bethesda was doing back then was totally innovated. They added Havoc physics into an RPG, right? It was 3-dimensional. Like, even that was pretty innovative, because the RPGs I grew up were Fallout 1, Fallout 2, Baldur's Gate 1, 2, Planescape Torment, these top-down, turn-based sprites. And you were able to do anything you wanted. And remember, the two games I had mentioned that I had created before were these linear 8, 10, 12, 15-hour games. And that's what the games were back then. You paid your $50 and you got a game, you experienced it 10 or 12 hours, and that was it, right? And this was even really before GameStop was much of a thing, where you could even sell them back. You were just out of the money, which was fine at the time because there wasn't the content to consume. Yeah. So anyways, these guys made this open world game where you come out of a cave and you see a mountain in the distance and you can walk to it. Now, these days, that's like, okay, of course. But in 2005, that was magic. Yeah. It was literal magic.
Totally insane.
In the technology that required to develop that, the innovation and stuff that studio spearheaded, I appreciate you saying that at the beginning, was amazing. And the fact that I played some small part in that over the years was really magical. And so when I went, I came in, and at the time, this is all public, Oblivion was supposed to be a launch title for the 360. And it was delayed. Yep. And there's a lot of game makers will listen to this. My advice is to never be a launch title. never do it, because
the magic and the horror of the launch
title.
There's
advantages to it. Like, if you have a unique IP or something, because there's not a lot of competing titles, your unique IP, like if there's only 10 games available, your chance of selling your game would be higher. Yep. This is the olden days. Everything's new now. But so there was advantages there, but generally, so we missed that window. So I had thought the game would have shipped by the time I started, or been very close to. So I was on it for 6 or 9 months, and so I got an additional production credit. And my role at that point, because I hadn't really found what I was going to do, they hired me just as a producer. I was doing a bunch of different things there: external production, internal production. They haven't even put me on the design department yet. And I just started playtesting the game and sending notes, right? And I was so happy to be playtesting a game that wasn't the same 10 hours over and over and over again. Like, when I had made Fantastic Four, I had to start playing it with the audio off, because you're working these long hours and it would trigger me. Like, I would just turn the sound off, because that's what you did, right? In order to craft a game requires constant iteration and polish.
Yeah, I started in QA in the PS1 era, so
you get it.
Yeah. Actually, before then, CD-ROMs, but
Oh God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah, it's very hard to do, and then you get a game. When the game started expanding, like we're talking about, and it's magical, but then you're also like, then you go, oh, holy shit! Like, there's so many more things I have to test.
God.
Yeah.
But the fun there was I wasn't specifically prescribed things, so I would be able to create whatever character I wanted and go in whatever direction I wanted, experience different things. And so even playtesting that game was a joy
Yeah.
because it was you could create your own you engaged with what you wanted to and how you wanted to. And I always thought that was the magic of Bethesda games is you get bored dungeon delving, you go you go search around towns. You get bored searching around towns. I got all these alchemy components I've been collecting obsessively as I travel the wilderness. I'm going to start delving into this system. And so you sort of pick your own way to experience the game, and it's not prescribed. So anyways, it was magical. I don't even remember the original source of the question, but Bethesda was just, again, it was a very magical place, and RPGs hold such a special place in my heart. That's why I'm still trying to make them.
Yeah, I mean, you've definitely worked on the best of them in so many different ways and so many different beloved franchises. It's you're very lucky to have had that experience.
Very lucky.
So, we're here really to talk about what you're doing now.
Sure.
So, how did Bethesda end for you?
So obviously I was lead producer of Fallout 4. And every game adds to your life and takes away a little. They're hard. Games are hard to make. And even anybody who's made a small game on Unreal or Unity and put it out and gotten feedback like they're hard to make, and as they get bigger and bigger, they're harder. So I was blessed to become lead producer on Fallout 4. And then I was project lead of Fallout 76, which was Bethesda's first endeavor into multiplayer and that architecture, like borderline MMO architecture. And we did it in 3 years, and it was very difficult. And obviously, it came out in a difficult state. And thankfully, we were able to turn it around. I worked on that project for a total of 5 years, many for the first 2 years through many patches and expansions and other things. So
people are still playing that game.
No,
by the way.
I love it. I still follow that game. I still play it. I'm so proud of what that's become. It's super unique. It's still very unique in that space. And I'm just very proud of its uniqueness and what it represents to the community and how successful the Fallout TV show was, that it fed into that. And the creators of that, the people who are at the helm of that right now are excellent people. Some of my favorite that I got to work with over my time on 76 down in Austin. And so anyway, I had done 16 years at Bethesda. COVID took a toll. Not in weird ways. Like there was as a gamer, it was sort of magical. I was like, oh, I get to play a game. I went back and played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 back to back, like 200 straight hours.
Wow.
Like, yeah. Like, well, you're sitting around, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like there's like, and so like I got to go back and play these RPGs. And one thing I realized is I enjoy working. I thought my retirement was going to be playing games endless hours. Like I love consuming games, but I need to be creative as well. I always look at it as consumption and creation. Right. I can't just be consuming all day. I need to be creating. So I paint Warhammer miniatures and I still write. And so like I need that because that's more fulfilling to me. But then I take breaks and consume for endless hours. I'm going through Path of Exile 2 right now for the third time or something. But so I had done what I felt like I could do at Bethesda. And I had this opportunity, because of the Microsoft acquisition to take a break. So I did. I took a sabbatical, and after the sabbatical, I realized that I needed a longer break. So I took the sabbatical in about another 4 or 5 months, and I started looking around. And in 2022, I mean, these stories are well told.
Yeah.
My joke is as a game creator, especially luckily with the pedigree that I had developed, thanks to Bethesda and my other work, you could find money under rocks. I mean, it was, I literally was funded on my second phone call.
Wow.
And I had 3 term sheets by the end of that week, right? And
it ain't like that anymore.
Oh, oh no, nah, it's the opposite of that. It's actually, we can talk about that, but
we will.
So I got, it was a lot of money, and I wanted, and I debated. So I had advice from a gentleman, Raphael von Leerup. You probably know
Sure,
Raphael.
yeah.
And he helped me, mentored me through some of this. Internally indebted to him, love him. Hinterland Games. And he said, build what you can with what you've got and stay small. And I did the exact opposite. I was like, well, that money was so easy to get. I'm going to do what I know how to do, which is come up with this preternatural cult. Like I'm into old horror, like H.P. Lovecraft and in alternative histories of Templars and all these things that I'd always wanted to sort of do. And I had what I still believe is a really cool idea. The elevator pitch, which I was never really supposed to reveal publicly, but I'm sure I called it Medieval Matrix. So you are a knight in this land, and we filed it down so you could play any gender or race you want. So it's very Abe Lincoln historical fantasy sort of stuff, historical fiction. But you're initiated into the Knights Templar. The initiation kills you. You go into the other world, and in the other world, just like Neo in the Matrix, you gain your powers and you bring them back into this world there where magic is heresy, right? And actual magic is real heresy. So you have to be very careful in how you utilize it to engage with the NPCs in the quest line we had.
That's interesting as hell.
It's fun.
That's
and
cool.
so that was where we were. And then anyway, so I'll just go through the rest of the story so we're all clear, because this is all public information at this point. I did an interview, like I mentioned, with PC Gamer a few months ago. We were very close to closing deals, and a lot of people in my situation had closed deals to complete these big games, and they're very expensive. They take a very long time. They're risks. And a number of them failed in 2023. They started to fail. And then when we were looking for further either publishing or Series A financing, that wasn't there. So we did massive round of layoffs in early March, which is devastating. I never would want to put anyone through that or go through that again. This industry is very difficult, and this has been a history through the industry over 20 years. This isn't new to early 2020s.
That's for sure.
And then we looked for much smaller amounts of funding, publishing, any kind of help to finish the game. And we developed a second prototype, which takes the ideas I just mentioned, but turns it into an RPG roguelite. So it was scalable, more sustainable, and we could basically build a game to scale to the budget we were lucky enough to continue to get. And then that didn't work. So we sort of submarined. The rest of the employees we had to let go of. There's only me and a couple of contractors right now, and my wife, who's our operations director. And so we've submarined, and now we are lucky enough to have a little more capital. So we're going to resubmerge, and we're going to try to finish this and put something up, either kickstart it, or did you kickstart too? Did you kickstart?
I didn't.
Okay.
I've thought about it 100 million times though.
Talk about that. The Kickstarters of the early 2010s are gone. I mean, even really good ones get 400,000 or 500,000, which is a significant amount of money depending on how you go about finding developers, but it's not enough to do a AAA game by any stretch of the word. So we're going to either Kickstarter or put something up on Steam just so something wicked has something, and we'll see what happens from there. Because I'm very excited, still very excited for the idea, and I know that we can execute very well on it. That I have no question. I'm like I said, I used to call it the war in my brain. So I was a creative for a very long time, still consider myself a creative, but as I had to train my producer muscles, because that's what I was at Bethesda. So I'm very aware of budgets and timelines and restrictions, and I try to make the smartest decisions for a game to see a pathway forward. And unfortunately, I couldn't for a weird song last year, but I'm hoping that this year will be, towards the end of this year, early next year, that'll be different.
Well, I mean, that story is not unique, I hate to say, right? Because of the the scenario that we're in the industry right now, which you did mention a minute ago is not unique to this industry. I mean, I have never personally worked at a company for 16 years. I've jumped around a lot for a variety of reasons. And for my personal journey, it's been great because I love working with new people and working on new things, and it's been great for me. But when you talk about layoffs, I mean, that was kind of like ingrained into my head, like when I first started in the industry. Like there's always been layoffs. There's always been cancellations and budget tightenings, and there's always been the economic hardship of the global economy that bleeds into video games and entertainment. I think we're hyper focused on it now because it's probably, it's definitely worse than it's ever been right now with the amount of layoffs, but it's not new. And I have always kind of been the guy who's like, I'm never bringing anything into work that that in heat,
Yeah.
right?
After 16 years, I had quite a collection of Bethesda, trust me.
Yeah,
it took me 2 or 3 trips to clean everything out.
I've always been like, well, this could go in the toilet at any minute, so I'm just gonna have nothing here. So if it does, like Robert De Niro, you smell the heat around the corner. But I mean, let's talk about this because you're actually a great example of kind of powering through it and managing through it. I mean, as you mentioned at that time, 2021, 22, it was very easy to get money. And selfishly, I wish I was looking for money at that point, but I wasn't. And there are a lot of studios that got a lot of money in that period, especially during that pandemic period, and many of them don't even exist anymore. And it's really hard watching that because, when you haven't experienced this, but like when you're early in your career and you go through a layoff, it's damaging. It's psychologically damaging, emotionally damaging, and you kind of never like get rid of it. It's always like in the back of your mind. Hence the nothing on the desk for me anyway. And thankfully, I've only actually been laid off once in my career. But that kind of like scar stays with you, and I really worry about the kind of future of our industry because we're seeing now like this wipeout of a weird of both like junior and senior talent.
Absolutely.
Right. Yes. And like how are we gonna rectify this? Like, how do we get young people back into the industry who are, like we were totally like ready to do whatever it takes, and also retain enough senior people who can pass it down. I mean, we're losing generational levels of talent in the industry right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think someone's going to give a talk about that tomorrow here. I could talk about this forever too. So yes, I know a number of senior people who I personally worked with who are they're just leaving. They're leaving the industry, right? Talented people who contributed a lot, not only to the games they worked on, but to fostering the generation that comes behind us, which is what I think it's also hit, like you mentioned, it's also hurting. A very good friend of mine who works in this industry, his daughter got a degree, very good grades, had interned at studios that I won't mention, and now they've been looking for a job for a year and can't find it. And he is in the industry, so if anyone has the connections to get her resume at least looked at, right? And that to me is listen, like you. And then the flip side, with the democratization of Unreal and Unity, anybody can make a game, right? You can get your buddy or a couple buddies and sit around and try to put something up. Some of them have been successful. So there's my son, who is now in his second year of college, is making his own game. And that's great. So there's two sides of the coin, but the experience that you and I got from shipping a lot of games teaches you a lot. So in the industry, vaguely, there's like, I'll just talk about the design track because that's what I've been focused on. That's what I produced basically at Bethesda, and that's what I was. So there's junior designers, mid designers, senior designers. Then you get into principals and directors and leads. But as a you would see a junior come in and you would know that they are going to try to do too much, right? They are going to take on that woman or man or whatever is going to take on more than they can. They're going to bite off more than they can chew is the term. And you don't want to discourage that, right? Because that's where creativity can come. Sometimes you come up with amazing stuff.
Yeah.
But you also, as a senior lead, you can mentor and caution them and help them through this. Oh, you're already working 10 hours a week, 10 hours a day. Trust me, in a year or two, that 10 hours a day is going to get worse. So don't do that. Now, don't crunch when it's not crunch, we used to say, right?
Yeah.
And learn how to choose your battles. But again, these are things that seems obvious in hindsight, like the idea of Something Wicked getting money and just making a game with the money we had. Obvious in hindsight, but when you're in it, you make decisions based on parameters of reality. So these are the little things that can lead somebody along the way. And like, don't other people want to work with, these luminaries like Todd Howard who have come along? Like I learned most of what I know from him, right? So you want to be able to transfer that down because listen, I'm very happy to be in this industry. This isn't a sob story for game makers. Trust me. I've had a great career. We've had great careers, enjoyed most of the time doing it. And what it is to me, it's looking at the industry as a whole and hoping that we can keep moving forward. There was the term, I call them comfort food games, black hole games. Like it's weird. Like games still make a lot of money. They still exist, but more people are spending more and more time with games that have been around for a very long time. And so we all need to figure out where the cheese is moved. There's a book from the 90s called Where's My Cheese? And the analogy is there's a mouse in a maze and the overlord of the maze puts the cheese in this one corner and all the mice know to go to that corner, right, to get the cheese. And then one day they move the cheese to a different place.
Yeah.
And the mice who still go to that corner don't make it, right? So you have to be able to innovate, think on your feet, come up with creative solutions to things, look at tools like AI and Unreal and find ways to do more with less or less with more, just something to make your game stand out, make yourself stand out.
Yeah, it's funny because it's never been easier to make a game and it's also never been harder. And the never been harder part is a new part of that sentence that's only kind of like a year or two old. Like we used to always, I'm used to saying it's never been easier to make a game, right?
Absolutely true.
And now it's like, you have to kind of wrestle with both of those things, whether it's, struggling with funding or making a game and putting out and getting discovered.
Discoverability. Absolutely. Yeah. There's 1,400 games that last year there was 1,400 games a month on Steam. This year it's probably, I don't know, could be double that. I haven't tracked it. And so I always used to joke on mobile because this was a problem in mobile 10 years ago too. There was 5,000 games a month coming on the Apple store, right? And so I would always say the best game ever made has been played by one person and no one knows it exists. Like you would just not, you hope for some virality or somebody to pick it up. And usually, and the cream often does rise to the top, but not always. And, that's why I looked at Steam because I've been a Steam PC gamer guy now. I don't even since Steam existed basically. And I called it the renaissance of games. I was into these turn-based from D&D. I was into turn-based games. And when I started I wanted to make Fantastic Four turn-based game. I loved turn-based combat. I thought it was great. Yes, because I had Final Fantasy Tactics. And so it's not just a D&D RPG. There was other examples of this. And I was told at the time that if you say the word turn-based tactics to a publisher, they pretend like they don't know what you're talking about. They're like, what are you talking about? We will, meaning they would never put money behind those games. Now you go on Steam and look for turn-based tactics games. Yeah. There's a new game released every day and they're often very good. Like it's not even a question of their quality. It's just a question of, I can't even come close to consuming this. Yeah. Right. So even in a genre that I love, I have to pick my battles because I just don't have the time to consume it all. Like Breach Wizard, or if there was a game like Tactical Breach was like there's the best. I haven't even played it yet because I still have this backlog of games that I'm trying to get through personally. And trust me, I play a lot of games. I would embarrass myself if I admitted it here. And so it's one of those things where it really is it's this weird blessing curse thing, right? Where again, like as a gamer, it's amazing right now. You go on Steam and you wait for a Steam sale, and for $2 to $5, you can get more. You can get a ton of games that can occupy you forever. Or you pick like your Path of Exile or your first person shooter of choice or whatever those are, Fortnite or Roblox, you can just play those forever. You can play them forever. There was a quote, there was a stat that was just flashed up there. There is 275,000 years of video games on Roblox or something like that. Like some amount of content that is, it's literally inconceivable. Longer than human history. It would take like longer than like we're looking going back into Neanderthal times. Like it would take you if you started now to play all the content on Roblox, and they stopped making it.
Yeah, I mean, I actually went to the Roblox developer conference last weekend. Admittedly, I only know enough about Roblox, that everyone who kind of doesn't play it knows. I mean, it's not for me.
It's not for me either.
Right.
Yeah.
But
that's not castigating it. I just didn't grow up playing those, so it's not for me.
Yeah, but man, it was fascinating seeing everything that they're doing. Anyways, it was really interesting. But when we're talking about the industry right now, the video game industry, we're looking at the same experience that the movie industry had, and then music, and now games. There is a consolidation of, let's call them labels or publishers or studios by mega corporations. Those are turning into these much bigger entities, but there's fewer of them. And then there's, of course, a proliferation of platforms that serve the indie space. And that's where things get really shifty, because I read somewhere there's like, I'm not going to get these numbers right, so
sure.
Nobody send me emails about it. But like, there's something like 700 million songs or something on Spotify that have never been listened to once.
Oh my God.
And like, as a musician myself and someone who creates and releases music and has to put music on streaming platforms, that's so depressing, right?
Every time I wanted to write a novel, I've wanted to be my first love was creative writing, and I always wanted to write. And maybe one of these days I'll actually do it or put something out. And I go to a used bookstore. I'm like, man, there's been a lot of books in the world. There are a lot of books. So it's the same. Like so what I saw this article the other day. So I'm quite, these are not original thoughts, but it was an interesting idea that every industry has gone through this, right? It's the consolidation of power and also the democratization of the tools.
Yep.
So YouTube and cell phones have made movies and things a lot easier to make. And then obviously books now you can self-publish books. You can go on you can write a book and put it on Amazon. You don't have to go to a book publisher they serve a function for marketing, for discoverability, and probably good editing and things. But there's a lot of examples of books that have become very popular that were self-published. Like there's tons of them.
Yep.
And so you have both. And so what I think you need to do is like, listen, musicians honestly, they got just kicked in the teeth. Like Adam and I grew up, and almost every band I had heard of was able to sell out mid-sized arenas. Like that doesn't mean all bands were, but a lot of bands. Like there was this Rochester War Memorial. I remember that was the where you'd go see concerts and where I grew up, and I saw a ton of shows that were. So now these bands could never do that. Like I go to venues with 400 or 500 people now, and I think it's a better experience. But for the musician themselves, like it's not a pathway to riches. And but what they did, which was interesting, is
all of those bands when they have interviews now, they all get asked the same question: what's your advice to give to young musicians? And they're all like, don't get into the music business.
You're going to start hearing that from video game makers too. Like that's when my son is trying to become a game maker, and I told somebody here that, and they just shook their head and like side to side, and I was like, oh, I agree. And sorry,
but
sorry, Cole.
No, but you know what? I mean, yes, I see where you're going with that, but I mean, people told me that too.
I know.
When I started,
yeah. So
right?
It's anything that is. Listen, I moved to Hollywood to be a screenwriter.
Yeah.
You know how many screenplays were being made back then? I think it was like 200 or something. It was such a small percentage chance. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It doesn't mean you shouldn't put yourself out there. I don't agree with that at all. But what I'm saying is that you need to, as musicians, they need to find other sources of revenue. So you get into merchandising and their online stores and their branding.
But I can tell you as a musician, that stuff sucks, man. It sucks because all of a sudden you have to shoulder all of the burden of all of that. Yeah. And it's like, I put an album out last year and I had to do all the TikTok and social media. Like, I wanted to blow my brains out.
No, sure,
like that
I'm
was
sure.
terrible.
Yep.
I just I want to make the stuff.
Yep.
But that's not the way it is anymore. But the labels, the music industry has put all of that on top of the artists.
Oh no! Well, that industry, I can bag that industry.
But that's
they've been exploitative for years.
That's happening now.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
happening in games,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
if
no.
you are, a band of people, under 10 people making a game, you don't have a marketing budget, right?
Oh, no.
You don't.
No.
And if you did, it would have to be millions of dollars
to get any kind of traction or wide audience for certain, or you get lucky on TikTok. Honestly, it's funny. So like Baldur's Gate 3 is a great example of a very successful role-playing game in the last couple of years, right? One of the most. And it had a lot of elements that you would, from the outside, would never have been successful. One, turn-based combat, right? But it had Dungeons & Dragons license. Larian had made a ton of RPGs, so they had the chops and experience. Again, this is where that goes back to that story too. Like the experience that staff had learned from shipping RPGs, and the little things you learn add up, and so they were able to successfully execute on an amazing game in a very difficult genre, frankly. And I still think that what made them sell and what made them penetrate past hardcore D&D nerds like you and I, like if just you and I bought it, it would have not nearly had the success. Is there was a TikTok video up of the druid turning into a werebear or something and copulating with another.
The bear, yeah.
And it got a lot of views, and a lot of people were watching that who weren't ever going to play Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
They were never going to play it. They'd never heard of it. Right. And so all of a sudden this became a thing. And I'll remember being out somewhere in an individual coming up to me who I would never assume would be playing this game, went on and on about it. And so you sort of got to find the ways to stand out. And thankfully it stood out and was an amazing game. So if you get both, you can have a Baldur's Gate success, or even something not as successful, but is still successful. There's been a lot of
think about that though.
Yeah.
If you get lucky and go viral, and you get lucky and the game is good.
No, I know. I don't think the game was good because of luck.
I'm just saying, when you're the odds of success,
so small.
Yeah, they're very small.
When you look at Elden Ring, another team that's shipped games for 25 years, so you see why you want to hold on to institutional knowledge, right? Because their experience making those boss fights ended in Elden Ring. Right. And Larian's experience with making these games ended in Baldur's Gate 3, and hopefully didn't end there. Will continue to be successful. I'm excited for a number of these games. I think we're going to see some of the games that are in the wings in the next couple of years. I think hopefully will be very successful as well. But again, you also don't want it all consolidated to 3 big RPGs that come out every couple of years, right? You want to have these AA even experiences that are is compelling and successful. Remember, success doesn't have to be tons of sales. It has to be some sales, though, because if you have no sales, then the studio closes. But it doesn't have to be astronomical. You want to hit a bench. You want to set a budget and try to meet or exceed those sales expectations. A lot of the pressure you get from VC and publishers is to these unrealistic expectations. They're not even making your money back. They want a 5x or 3 or 10x, 100x, and then they'll consider it. And if they 5x, that's a failure, right?
Yeah.
And which is where we have to have some kind of reality check on that at some point.
I'll never forget working on a game, and it was a sequel, and we only sold 5 million, and they told us it was a failure.
It's great, isn't it? Yeah. No, trust me, I know exactly how you feel, because I had the exact same thing a couple of times. Yeah. Millions of copies sold, easily in the black. But what happens at a larger publisher, just vague, in my understanding, is they'll set a sales expectation and they budget around that.
Yeah.
So even if your game makes its money back, if it doesn't hit sales expectations, they have to readjust their financial models and forecasting based on money that they thought was coming in that they might have borrowed against that didn't come in.
Yeah.
So it's these sort of what did Dingo say? Gold fever gambits. I was like, that's pretty much it. Gold fever gambits. Yes.
So if you're you're deciding to make a game today, you basically have two choices. And this is actually the same thing with music and movies also. It's you ignore everything and you just make the thing you're passionate about making. And we were lucky enough just to see a talk by Nintendo this morning.
Yep.
I mean, it's easy for Nintendo to say, we're just going to do things that are great and
Fun.
like it's easy for Nintendo, but it wasn't at one point.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
But you can either just immerse yourself into the artistic and creative expression and ignore everything, or you can try to game the system with the right genre at the right time, with the right business model and the right, strategy. And that's also a way to do it. And neither guarantee success.
Oh, not even close.
And neither even guarantee finishing or even, the old chestnut, like every game released is a miracle, is literally true.
Yes, as you and I know. Yes.
Including the big ones.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Especially the big ones.
The big ones, yeah, but
right.
all of them. Yeah, all of them.
So, like, if you can take yourself out of what you're doing right now and, presented with those two paths, what are you going to do?
Well, listen, it's easy to say, just go for the passion, right? Because that's sort of the obvious answer. And I think that is where you will find success, or can. Because if you just try to copy other people's success, you end up with a facsimile, and facsimiles are not as good as the original.
Yep.
And so you have to find, even if I want to make a role playing, let's take the genre I know. I want to make a role playing game. Great. Like, there are so many different kinds and things. Like, are you going to focus on narrative? Are you going to focus on tactical combat? Are you going to make it open world? Are you going to make it zone based? Are you going to make it linear? There's so many things. Like, people call Assassin's Creed role playing games. They call Path of Exile role playing games. They call World of Warcraft role playing games. Like, there's this. So you have to define your experience and know at a core what you want to do. I really believe, and have hung my hat on, a simple idea well executed is worth infinite crazy ideas that are poorly executed. Like, you have to execute on whatever it is you want to do, and you have to stick to it, because it's over a course of a game development, it's very easy to be distracted. We used to call it the E3 syndrome. E3 is long dead, but you'd have a new lead designer go to E3 and all of a sudden want to add 3 features to the game that they saw at E3, and everyone's like, dude. Like,
or the reverse.
Oh yeah.
Getting ready for E3 demo.
Oh God.
And adding stuff.
or yeah, the faking that the smoke and mirrors they had to go on that waste everyone's time. And yeah. So I think, listen, it's easy to say the first, but at the same time, there has to be a reality check if you have money from investors or a publisher, or your own self-funded, you've mortgaged your house. Like, you have to understand that there is a business element to this that has to be minded to. Should it be the driving force? No, unless it's going to sink the ship, right? So if you I use the simplest analogy for you. You want to go 100 miles and your car holds 120 miles of gas. You fill up the car with gas, which costs money. That's all the money you have. If you take a circuitous route and you wind around and you don't get to your destination and you run out of gas, you're abandoned. It's over, right? So you have to figure out how to get to your destination with the gas you have in the tank. So there has to be someone minding it. I think it's what I always saw, which was successful in my career, is there's this, I called it the war in my brains. There's this conversation that has to happen in creative and production, where schedule is a tool, not a cudgel. And you have to be mindful of it, but you have to allow creative to sometimes wander off in the field and find the fun stuff. So there's this balance that has to happen over the course of a game. And in my experience in the beginning, you allow a player or the people that are working on the game to sort of experiment a lot, the pre-production phase. And then once you define that feature set, then you get a little more narrow. The producers take a little more power. And then during production, you have to save time at the end of production for found work, for the cool things. Like, if we just did this, the game would be so much better. Then you want to save time to do that, right? You don't want to schedule to the day it's due, so you aren't allowing players to iterate and find the fun. And then the power of the production comes even more during alpha, and then during beta when you have to try to close a game. So there's this push pull that has to happen, because I can talk about genres that I'm not involved in. Like, you see what happens when a creative individual has all the power. Like, George R. R. Martin still hasn't finished Game of Thrones, to my chagrin and the anger of a lot of people. And I'm not throwing stones at George R. R. Martin. I love his books. I've read them several times. I think they're brilliant, but he is very successful and has all the power. He doesn't have to pay his mortgage by putting a book out. Had he had that pressure, I guarantee you that book would be out, because he would have to pay his mortgage, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this balance that has to happen, and I think it's very important and healthy. So I think passion is super important, but I also think there has to be some kind of realistic expectations on what you can deliver with that. I think if you are just in anything, if you're just in music to make money or get rich or get famous, you're just in games to get rich or get famous, you're just writing books to get rich or get famous. There was this quote from a band, Tool, and they were like, then just don't do it. Go do something else. If you want to get rich, there's plenty. Go get into finance, become a hedge fund manager, like, do something else. There's many paths to money. You and I got into this because, again, like when I played Zork when I was a kid, and I typed "kick the bucket" into a green screen text prompt, and something actually responded to that. Something clicked in my brain, and I was like, "This is amazing. I want to do this." And it's amazing when you're able to see your vision realized on a screen, and then to watch people enjoy that. It's true joy. It's not pleasure. It's like deep, soulful joy. Like the stories we had over the years at Bethesda, where, severely ill people played our games, and people, like, just you hear these stories and they're so heart touching, because you're, like, you've affected someone's life, and it's amazing. Like that. That's what I said. Like, I'm not weeping for game makers, and definitely not weeping for me. It's been such an amazing experience to put something out in the world and see it being played, and watching people gain joy from because, like, entertainment's sort of a flippant word, but there's something deeply resounding about a good novel, a good piece of music, a good game, and if you're able to execute on that at some point in your life, like it's a sense of richness that can't honestly be put into words.
Yeah, I mean, we make these things because we're obviously creatively driven, but we're making stuff for people to escape into. And I think that's a really important thing to never forget. Like, we aren't curing cancer.
No.
We are making entertainment, and it's a creative endeavor, but it's also a business. And when you're able to marry those things, and it resonates with the people who play the thing that you were able to dream up in the shower one day,
That's it. Yep.
and go through the rigorous task of finding money or getting it approved, and then putting a team together, making it. I mean, it's truly a miracle that it happens, and there is nothing better when people, tell you, this game was important to me.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Now, this game got me through a dark period of my life. This game, like, I mean, the best entertainment both entertains and allows you to escape, but also can reveal aspects of it can create empathy. It can you see things in different lights. Like, I never saw this point of view, and games can do that. I've seen it, and you can name movies and films and books just because they're older and stuff that have done this, and we're very privileged to have been able to take part in this. It's been great.
Yeah.
And in these days, like, I've been lucky enough. So now that we have been sort of on hold, I have been using my creative, like, cycles to sort of reevaluate RPGs and try to look at, like, is there ways to take the Baldur's Gate co-op conversation system and make it more cooperative with multiple people? Are there ways to allow a game to be played on a Switch and a PC and a phone where you can still collaborate and play with players and still make it a game that appeals to those different interfaces, right? So it's fun for me. Like, so in my downtime, like I just play games, and sometimes I'm escaping, but sometimes I'm thinking, and then I get in the shower and I go, this and this together could be something cool. Right. And I just hope to get the opportunity to put them again, like to put it out so people can play it, right? Like it or hate it. Like I've made games that have reviewed very badly, and I've made games that have reviewed very well. And you learn from both experiences. You actually learn more from the failures. And they're both, though, you mentioned the PTSD you get from laying off. You get PTSD from putting a game out with real bad reviews too. And you get very scared, and that can kill innovation, right? You get very scared to like experiment and try. And listen, like there's this, and I think in like metaphors and analogies, and I used to downhill ski when I was in better shape. And one of the things you used to say, if you never fall when you're skiing, you're not pushing yourself, right? You're just, so every once in a while you got to scrape your knees or fall, and then you pick yourself back up and keep going down the hill, right? But you learn and you get better, because if you're not pushing yourself and falling every once in a while, you're definitely not getting better. So.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about like the aspect of reviews, good and bad, before the onset of the internet, a little different, right? Like it was like, 10 to 15 magazines, right?
Absolutely.
And that was fine, whatever.
Oh, it's done. But but it's not this constant onslaught of hate.
Yeah.
Trust me.
It's I was playing a game the other day, and I was like, yeah, let me go. I was doing research for one of these podcasts. Let me go look at, at the Steam reviews. And, it took me less than 10 seconds to get to the, red thumbs down on this game, but I played 500 hours of it.
Yeah.
Like, that's a real hard thing to kind of justify as a creator, because you're like, on one hand, this person is giving their opinion on the game that they spent 500 hours on, and they're probably giving that opinion based on what the game has turned into, because of course they've played it for that long.
A bad patch. Yes.
Yeah.
And they're upset. And they put it, which is fair. I'm not gonna.
It's totally fair.
It's totally fair. But then, but if enough of those go up, you'll stop people from even looking, right? Because when you see mostly negative reviews on Steam, I even in a genre, I was like, you generally don't even click on it, right? But it could be a bad patch. It could be anything. It's tough. It's really tough.
But it is the kind of democratic, consumer-driven place that we live in.
Yep.
And it's challenging for sure, because bad reviews are fine. Like a player says, I don't like your game. That's totally legit.
Opinions are totally legit.
But also, like, you can get something out of that as a creator.
100%.
Right? Every time.
100%.
And so you have, when you start stacking up like all the stuff we've talked about, and then this kind of the very blunt, pointed feedback you get from players is challenging. And some people are not made for that. Some people can kind of take it. I mean, you carry it with you no matter what, no matter who you are. I don't believe anyone who says they don't read their reviews.
Oh, no, I don't believe that at all.
Everyone does that.
I know.
But some people aren't built for that.
No,
also,
it's hard.
Some people aren't built for building and running a studio, right? And it's really important to like identify that in yourself as a creator, because that informs all of this too.
I mean, I'll say something that will probably make some people raise their eyebrows, but during that magical time when money grew on trees for game makers in early 2020s, a lot of people got funded who had success at very successful studios, right? So they were able to translate that success into getting money to make another game, which is fair. But a lot of game development studios or game makers, in my experience, this is an opinion. The emails, send them to Adam Orth.
No, please don't. Do not send them to me.
My opinion was they never saw sort of the old analogy how the sausage was made. Like they were shielded often from some of the difficult decisions, financial decisions that they made, which you should do to creative people. Like you should sort of try to keep them out of the financial decisions, because again, like you don't want a creative person making all their decisions based on money, right? Either success or failure. But you saw a lot of studios, they started and they funded and then they didn't. And listen, you can point your finger at my studios just as much as anybody else's. So you saw a lot of people who weren't involved with profit and loss and some of the decisions that, like, every time you delay a game and you have like a massive team, that is costing somebody somewhere millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And it is not trivial. And so you can point for like publishers bad, this and that, but at the end of the day, like you have a massive team and you've delayed even a month. Like some burn rates in these massive games are $10 million a month, right? So you are costing, it's not just lining up marketing campaigns and all the rest of it, which is true. You're actually costing real cash, which furthers risk. So I saw less, like, again, like, and you didn't, that's why I was proud of our studio, because we endeavored to put prototypes out, which we had. Like we had fully functioning prototypes of two different, similar but different games. The end of our, well, not quite the end, but at the time we had allowed it to make them. And you saw a lot of studios come out and then they're delay, and then the game comes out and it's mediocre, it's full of bugs, and you like that is also on the studio, right? It really is. Like, and
oh yeah, I mean, I think when I started my first. I've done a couple studios now. When I started my first studio, I think I was probably like 12 or 13 years in the industry at that point. And at that point, I had a variety of design, creative, director, and leadership roles. And I have seen a lot. I know what it takes to make a game. And let me tell you something. The amount of stuff I did not know.
Same here.
When I started my first studio was insane. Like I actually thought I was going to be being creative and making a game every day. Like that barely happened.
In fact, it can be a danger, because you have to be making the harder decisions, which are, how do I keep funding the studio? You have to be looking for money. You have to be making sure people are there. It is hard.
Yeah,
so
making sure all my friends who I, hired out of steady jobs have health insurance.
Oh no, I hear you. So thankfully for me, like that's why my wife Jessica worked with, like, she had experience running commercial enterprises, right? So I remember, she told the story last night at dinner, like I was looking in health insurance and I had hired this agency to help me with this. And I would tell her what they're telling me. She was like, that's not true. And then more things. So finally, over time, she's like, okay, I'll help you with health insurance. Okay, I'll help you with this. I help you with this. And now she took over all operations. So at least it allowed me a little bit of game time. And at the end, I can't, as a CEO or founder of a studio, you can't ignore the operations stuff.
Nope.
At all. No way. And then it's just little things like you have employees and you're like, oh, this is their salary. And you always know there's overhead to that. But the amount of overhead in the United States to us individual salary is it's 25 to 40%. So if you're not assuming 40% over a salary, you are misbudgeting your game.
Yeah.
Period. You should maybe 50%. So at least you have some wiggle room. And so these are the kind of things like you don't want to figure them out 2 years in. Like you need to know this from day one, or you're
I'm here to tell everyone,
resources.
like you have no idea how many different types of insurance you need.
Oh no, no! I needed individual insurance for myself. Like again, I'm highest thank you and praise to my wife who's put up with this and encouraged me to do this and helped me so much along the way. Because again, like if I didn't have her, at best I would be floundering. And at worst, I would have really, really tanked the business. But it allowed me, again, that at least 20% of my time, because I wanted to focus on culture. You mentioned in the beginning, like I really wanted to focus on culture because we did all remote, right? And there's good and bad to that. And I've learned some of the bad to that over time. And I'm not as bullish on it as I once was, but I still believe if you focus on that and you understand that's what you're doing, you can be successful. But at the same time, you have to focus. You can't just run a studio like the studios are in the early 2005 where everyone's sitting in a room together. You have to really have a culture of respect and trust and honesty. And we call it creative, there's constructive criticism. Everyone knows what that is. We call it constructive conflict. So how do you disagree with an idea? Like, how do you, and we wanted everyone to be like, hey, I don't think this is right. And having adult conversations that weren't personal or angry or full of emotion, but giving a space where people can question my decision making, question it, because the worst thing is like in this culture that can creep into fear or these hierarchies that get too rigid. You in a remote studio, like we had a really startup mentality. Like, I don't care what your title is, if this needs to be done and you can help do it, so you're going to help. And so
titles are meaningless.
Titles are they're meaningless. They're meaningless. And in fact, the more you hold on to them, sort of the weaker you appear to me, to be honest. Like, just do, like I used to say, if the metaphorical toilet cleaning, like if the toilet is clogged and I am the only person who can fix it, I don't care what my title, I have to go fix it. Right. Like, and thankfully, you have to hire individuals who have that mindset. You have to instill it in your culture. You have to reinforce it personally. Like, one of the big things in creativity is vulnerability. Like, oftentimes the best idea in the room is the scariest one to say, right? And you want an employee or anyone to be able to say the big crazy idea, because you never know how that might click. That might click. But if you created a culture where that is not okay, or you'll be looked at like that's like someone goes, that's stupid or something, like, oh my God, like you
might as well just quit.
You should become get into real estate, get into finance, do something else. Yeah. I'm saying, like, there's plenty of ways to make money in the world.
well, that's a good place to kind of pivot out of all the scary stuff we've been talking about.
Fun stuff.
In my research for this podcast with you, I found a couple things terms that have come up. One is radical creativity.
Yep.
And one is smart iteration. Let's talk about those things because we've probably scared everyone.
Yeah. They've turned it off as it's doom and gloom.
Yeah.
So games design is an iterative process, right? I heard that very early on at Seven Studios, continued that and instituted that culture throughout my career at Bethesda. And I learned this in my writing degree. Like, you want to be able to, there's that Gandalf quote, even the wise doesn't know all ends. I've been blessed to make 7 games. You start a game and you don't quite know where it's going to finish, right? You have ideas where it wants to go, but you have to allow an organic process to happen along the way. If you get too rigid, you'll miss opportunities. And if you're too soft, you'll never get to the end, right? So you have to, again, these weird pressures that you have to sort of self-impose on yourself to sort of to define what creativity means and go forward. So I love the iterative process. So this is some examples of what I've seen over my time. Like, so we'd get in a room to do feedback on a level, let's say, or a quest. And we did this at Seven Studios. So, and I observed over time, this is the things you learn from doing it. Like, so we'd have the designer or artist or whomever taking notes based on the feedback. And then they'd go and fix that stuff, right? And then you'd find that people have this weird thing where it's called selective hearing. They hear what they want to hear. So if somebody said something that they didn't agree with, they coincidentally didn't write it down. I'm not even saying that's a conscious decision, right? But so I had to put a step in there where the lead or producer would come in and go, okay, there was different feedback. This is the end of the feedback. So there's these processes that have to be in place and these checks and balances, and then you play it again. Right. And then you play it again. And we would loosely define what an iteration was based on, the analogy is I paint these Warhammer miniatures, right? And you don't want to dig in on a very specific details early in the painting process. You might want to change your color scheme. There's things you might want to do after you've blocked all the colors in, right? You block all the colors and it's easy. It takes about an hour and you go, oh yeah, that looks really good. These contrast well, my eye's going to the right parts of the miniature, or if you like put purple and green together and you're like, that doesn't quite look good. at least at that point, you can paint the purple over with a different color. But if you spent 12 hours shading and highlighting and executing a pattern, a filigree on that purple, you're never going to paint it over. So you try to institute these stopgap checks along the way. Radical creativity is, again, it's the crazy idea in the room. Like, I have some ideas now of things that I'm noodling in my head, and maybe not for Weird Song, but for other games. And they're sort of crazy, right? And I get nervous because I was like, man, as a producer, I know this is going to be really hard. But you want to at least have these out and discuss them, because you never know. A tech guy might go, I can do 90% of what you want really easily. Well, let's do that then, right? Let's get it in 90% of the way and decide if that last 10% that's going to take all this time is worth it. My experience is most times that 90% is not good enough, but it's sufficient to execute on the vision you had, right? And if you don't express that crazy idea, they'll never be able to go, oh no, we can do most of that right now. Right. So again, like that sort of that culture of like, we had it at Bethesda, I had it at 7 Studios, where you just try to let people freely express their creative ideas and in a way that is safe. And a lot of things are said no to, and then I called it the reason why. So I learned this the hard way over my time. Like, it's very easy to say no to something. And over time that becomes in a group of people who've worked together 5 games, they'll know you've earned their trust and respect. So when you say no, you don't have to get into it so much. But in the beginning of a new team, it doesn't matter how many games you worked on, what your titles are, what awards you've won. You really should explain why, right? And they may agree with you or disagree with you, but at least that gives them the respect of not just hearing a 2-letter word, right? And so over time, like, I had to relearn that over my years. Is like, so when I say no, I say, this is why. This, and this. And they might come with very good counter arguments. No, if we do 80% of it, we'll be able to get most of the way there. And they'll go, okay, I'm wrong. And being able to admit when you're wrong, like, it's so important as a leader. One of the things I loved, and I probably mentioned his name too much, but Todd Howard, if he didn't know the name, if somebody used a term or an acronym or something he didn't understand, he would ask what it meant. He was never afraid to ask what it meant, but that allowed everybody else in the room to go, I don't know what you're saying, and not feel stupid. Right. And those are the kind of things that are really important in a lead, to be able to be vulnerable enough to go, I don't know what EBITDA is. Right. And to say it once and then learn. So then you know what that is. Right. And you're not saying, and instead of, the worst is when you smile and nod your head and you have no idea what that meant. And then but the person who said it to you assumes you do. And then you go, oh no, that's how much money we're going to have at the end of the day. That's an important thing to understand what I'm saying here, right? Instead, you just nod your head. So anyways, you learn and you learn from making mistakes. But I really like, so it's funny you mentioned when you.
Well, hold on a second. I want to
yeah, you dig into something but just quickly, one of the things I learned, and you mentioned this, is when I started Something Wicked, I realized that I had to let go a lot of the creative process. I had the vision for the game, and I trusted the folks that I had hired to sort of execute on it. And I decided that I was going to look at the building of the business as my creativity. Does that make sense? So I actually totally changed my brain set. But anyways, totally. Go ahead.
So the reason why, right? That's connected to no.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, or I think I know my answer to this, but like, when you are on a team and you're leading a team, and if you're the kind of steward of the creative vision or the leader or whatever, the vessel, whatever it is, I think when you say no to an idea and you explain why in the right, correct way so it's supported, that has to go back to the vision of the game. And more often than not, I've found that, the vision of the game is not clear enough.
100%.
Right? It's not clear enough, and that's my fault.
Yes.
Right? So I'm saying no to someone, I'm explaining the reason why, but it's my fault, right? So making sure that everyone on the team is in lockstep with what the creative vision is, at least in that stage of development, because we all know that changes, throughout the development process. It's always kind of morphing and changing, but like, it's really important to marry the reason why with the vision of the game and how the team perceives that. Because if they're not perceiving the vision of the game, they're not working to the same place that everyone else or other people on the team are.
And that's where resentment comes in and hurt feelings and
but also
all the darkness.
Yeah. That's how execution fails.
Yes, 100%.
Because you're not executing on the same thing. Yes.
It's so on Word Song, sorry, I pronounce it wrong myself. We look at, we defined RPG, which again, like to you and I might know what I'm saying about open world RPG, but we literally got into, this is exactly what we're building. Cause even people who have made RPGs like have totally different definitions of what that means. Yeah. Right. And so, and it seemed like sometimes it can seem like you're not talking down to people, but you're explaining things that should be painfully obvious, but you need to explain the painfully obvious things. Otherwise you have that assumption that someone understands what you're saying and they don't, and they start working on something that's not quite the way you perceived it to be. And that's where a lot of problems, you can lose time, you can lose confidence, you can lose you can walk down a slippery slope that way. And yeah, so defining the experience and the vision of the game is paramount importance, and revisiting. And it also helps you when you have to make hard decisions, because a lot of games are compromised and difficult. I used to call it what's the least bad decision today. And if you have a strong vision for the game and everyone understands what it is, it's easier to make those decisions, right? If you don't, then these decisions can be paralyzing because you don't understand where you're trying to go.
Do you think that the studio or company pillars and vision should be integrated into the vision of the game?
I don't know. So it's funny. So when I started the studio, I did a lot of research and sort of looked at back in my career and what I experienced that was great, what I experienced that was not so great, and tried to make a good.
I asked this question because
it's very interesting. Yeah.
The Nintendo presentation that we just watched, their company pillars are in the game.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that ultimately it should be in some regards, because again, games are often a series of very difficult decisions with no right or wrong answer. You're just making a decision. Do we do this or do we do that? And neither seem to be the 100% even close. The easy decisions are the ones that are obvious. The hard decisions are the ones where you're like, I flip a coin, I don't know. But if you have the watchwords for the game, for the visions of the studios, it's helpful. So one of ours was trust, right? And so when we were building the studio, trust was very important, because again, in a remote culture, I can't see the person in the cube doing the work, so I have to trust that they're doing the work, right?
Yeah.
And that comes from myself, and they needed to trust me. And so we hired an IT person in when we got like 30 people, because again, I couldn't personally manage the email server anymore. And they immediately started putting in like the keyloggers and stuff. And I was like, whoa, time out. Like, we're not doing any of that. Like, the end of the day, if somebody isn't doing the work, it'll be obvious in the work. I don't need to keylog them to know they're here at 9 a.m. I don't honestly care. Right. But people do this stuff. Like, there's remote companies now turn cameras on. You have to be sitting in front of your screen all day. Like, no, I'm a big believer in treating adults like adults. And if the person doesn't behave like an adult, you have a conversation. Hey, you're working 10 hours a week, and we need to have a conversation. But at the end of the day, it's about someone being happy and comfortable in their role, in the output should reflect that. And so anyways, but that was an example of where we had this company culture, and I stopped them. And I was like and I had to stop them so many times. Like, no, we're not doing this. Someone plugs a USB in. I was like, I don't care. Like, like if somebody releases files online, then we'll care. Right. But I'm not going to like stop them from, do you want it to stop us from gaming? And I was like, no, like if they want to use their rigs to game, great. Like, I don't care. We're making games.
Yeah. I mean, these are all the things that most people are shielded from when they work at game companies, and then they jump out and, go into a startup. Speaking of which, so what's your plan for the next, what's your plan?
So Something Wicked is going to, we are going to move forward with Weird Song in some capacity. My business partner and I are right now seeking, we are going to find a way to either kickstart this or put a demo up on Steam or generate interest. There was a lot of interest when we announced it opening Night Live. Really excited about the vision. I actually revealed more about the vision today than I ever have. Because at this point it doesn't really matter. And
it's a good place to do it.
No. And just to execute on something that proves a creative idea. And like, listen, like you see, like, again, like Rebel Wolves is putting out Dawnwalker, and I met Conrad a couple of times, once or twice, and I'm so happy for them. And this, because people want RPGs. They haven't stopped wanting them. And there was like Baldur's Gate 3, and then a bunch came out last year. And I think Baldur's Gate 3 sort of changed the bar for them. So some of them were more successful than others. And I get all of that. But people want RPGs and they want fun RPGs. The idea, like, listen, here's a simple idea executed well. Vampire RPG, period.
Yep.
How could no one have thought of that? It's great. And there was obviously Vampire Bloodlines and others, but it hasn't been done in a really long time. Everything I've seen from that studio looks amazing, right? And he's getting I got Gamescom Game of Show, like, good, great. I wish him all the success in the world. I hope that game sells a bazillion copies and is fantastic. Like, I believe that the success in this, we all benefit from success. That's why I really hope this industry sort of finds its footing. So AA, AAA, all these games can find their footing. There will always be successes and failures and difficulties and layoffs, but this last 2 years has been calamitous. And I want game developers to be happy and successful. I want games to be happy and successful because the gamers exist. They want the games. And I think we're here to make them for them, you know? And
we'll never stop.
We'll never stop. I'll never stop. I don't. COVID was interesting. Like I mentioned, like, I was like, oh, my retirement's going to be sitting around playing 100-hour role-playing games. And like, I need to make stuff. I'm not happy just consuming. It's actually, it's depressing to me. So I love to make stuff. So I'm hoping that folks are excited once we reveal more about the game and what we're doing, people will get as excited as I am for it.
Well, when that time comes, you'll have to come back on and walk us through all that.
Adam, it's been a pure pleasure.
Yeah,
honestly.
That's really great. Great conversation. And
I can't believe an hour and a half went by that fast. Honestly, I looked at my watch 5 minutes ago. I was like, oh my God, it's almost one.
Yeah, we definitely got into it. All right, Jeff, thanks so much. This is great chat, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right.